them to exist.
I guess so. It is a need, isn't it?
Right? But I don't know. The weird thing is how much prevalence it gained.
Yes.
Like that's just what I don't. That I don't think you can ever really understand because we weren't alive.
No. Yeah, a lot of very strange beliefs
Right?
built out of that.
Right? But so do you have anything pressing that you want to talk about today?
Not pressing, but I'm ready to think about what to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not pressing, but the loss of my wife since we started has been kind of tough.
You think about it every day?
Yeah, pretty much. And she was a cool person.
Mm-hmm.
She was a great person, a wonderful partner, good at everything she attempted, and she got very sick. So she had a very hard time the last couple of years of her life, which was very tough on her, and tough on me, but not that tough compared to what she was going through. So that's what we were up to.
Did you, when you were younger, did you always think about like love and kind of hold it up on a pedestal, or was it not really in your mind until you met Norma?
It was not until my mind until I met her, but as soon as I met her, it was all over. I mean, I stopped looking and I stopped, considering finding a woman because she filled every need that I had for companionship, for partnership, for music, for absolutely. She was
Business.
and business, yes, yeah. She was a great business partner. In fact, I don't think I could have gone and done, any of what I achieved except that she was my partner in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was okay before we got together in business. I was doing all right and I was being successful. But it wasn't until until she suggested that we partner up and start our own agency that things really started going well for us, or for me. Because she was going to be doing well anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that needed support, and she gave it big time. So that's so yeah. But I miss her, but I understand what goes on and how it happens. So I don't know if I told you what I'm up to now.
Mm-mm.
No, my plans for the.
We talked about your plans for Mexico last time. Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah.
In business, in the law school there.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Yeah. That is what I'm very excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
But not because I plan to be a lawyer, but because I really want to learn how Mexican law works.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a conceit or a desire, because it's not going to do anything for me other than satisfy my urge to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a big concern of mine.
What desires do you think drove your life earlier in your life?
Succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Succeeding in business. It wasn't business, it was in jobs.
Yeah.
I had jobs. I didn't have a business. And I did mostly really well in all of them. And when I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to do, I left the place where I wasn't doing it and found a place where I could do it. So that, I was very strategic in my approach to where I wanted to work and where I did work. It wasn't until Norma said, hey, let's dump these people and go off on our own? And I said, of course not. That's not the right thing. That's not how you do it. You hook up with a big company and they carry you along. And I did that, and it was fun for me. I enjoyed it, and she was doing that too, and she hated it. She was very particular and understood what she liked and what she disliked, and she really disliked stupidity. I was not that
judgmental about that.
I made do with it. One of my strengths was I helped people who were not up to speed, be successful.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for me, and I felt really good about it. But that didn't bring me much in terms of success. And it wasn't until she and I started working together that all of that really paid off. So.
How long were you working in for corporations before Norma told you to? Do you remember?
Let me think about it a little bit. Yeah. Well, all my life. I mean, since my age 20, 21.
Exactly.
I was working for somebody else until probably when did I start working together with her? Maybe 25 or so. And as soon as we started, it just I was doing well everywhere, and I was making money and being successful, and not even moderately so, quite successful.
Yeah.
But then we got together, and it just turned up the heat and the success and the fun of working in the business. So, and I also got a lot of recognition for working in the business, and it was recognition for my efforts, but behind the scenes, when I was doing my thing, she was supporting me in the background. When she wasn't, and she was also leading. She was a leader as well, as a huge supporter. So I was very lucky to have that from someone, and we were happy together. Besides, we had a really nice life. We loved our kids. We enjoyed our kids. We had a good relationship with them, and we had a good relationship between ourselves. So it was really kind of cool and surprising to me. I didn't think it'd work that way, but it sure did.
Because in your family, there's a lot of, or I don't know, but what you saw that relationships were more tumultuous than yours was, like more.
No. Most of my family is pretty stable in relationships.
So why was it surprising?
Why
was you and Norma's relationship so surprising?
Because I was having it. I didn't know I would have that. I also had my elder brother, who was my role model. He was having a terrible time with his life as a husband, and his wives were, not. He was not a successful guy in that. And he was successful in everything else, but he was not a successful guy.
And do you think you were going to follow suit?
I
just didn't know.
I would have found it very very normal to follow suit, because that's how you did it. But I didn't really think that. And when I met Norma, I was sure that I had met someone forever. It was not that was a surprise, and it was a great surprise, and how happy it made me. and how happy she seemed to be. So that was the other thing, is how do you, not only being happy, but making someone else happy was a big deal.
But it seems as though, because sometimes we're usually, you have your life, you have your work life, and you have your
home life.
significant other and your home life.
Yeah.
But they're separated. But for you, it was almost connected in a sort of way.
It was well connected, except that at the beginning,
It wasn't.
you know, I would work, I would go home, and we'd
Exactly.
have a good family life anyway. And then all of a sudden, work and home were you know, the same.
And did you like that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. We had a lot of fun. Part of the fun was being able to contribute to each other any time of the day or night. So we would have a lot of conversations at night about work, you know, that were related to the work, and about making the work better or different or whatever. And it was very pleasant, because she was up for it and so was I. So we were very much together in our timing. So because a lot of people who work together need the space, and we didn't seem to need the space. We were always chugging along and doing good work, and she was always thinking of good copy. I was thinking of good strategy.
Yeah.
And it was quite satisfying, very satisfying to me. And I know it was satisfying to her as well. So we did okay. That was a surprise. And as you say, there I see my brother, who I admired, and I was following in his footsteps. And all of a sudden, his footsteps were for the birds. I did not like them at all, because I didn't understand how he lived a life with such bad relationships, and since he and I were both very strategically inclined, except once I had Norma, I was not strategically inclined to search for anybody else, and he didn't. He kept on looking even after. So he married. He was looking for a different thing in his marriage or marriages. He was looking for. It didn't seem to be love that he was looking for. It seemed to be convenience and success. Like he wanted to marry a woman with a famous father. That was one of his issues in life. Looking for that right woman, and he found a couple of them, and they did work out for him. And then he married one of them, and that didn't work out for him. And then he married someone finally that he really loved, and she was a terrible influence on him. So the one he loved really spoiled his life, and the others were useful, but not all that successful. So it was a very different thing, and I wasn't concerned about that for me. No, I wasn't concerned about it for him. I was thinking he was really being very unintelligent or unstrategic in his choices, which he should have known better, but he didn't. And until his last one, the one that spoiled his life, he made a permanent choice, and he really was engaged with her, and she was a pretty awful human being. And so she ruined his family life. She didn't like the family. Yeah. And not liking the family is, in my circle, was a very unstrategic thing to do. It just spoiled things, you know. You were not happy with an entire family, well, you know, you didn't have the quality of life that was possible. And I found that it was interesting though, because of the all of us were married with a couple of exceptions, and my older sister and me being two of those exceptions out of six. But the other four were getting divorced all the time. I mean, they all got divorced, and Norma was the least acceptable to my family. My mother didn't like her at all, and she's the one that stayed.
Mm-hmm.
The others left. No?
Why didn't your mother like her in the beginning, or did she continue not to like her, or?
She did like her in the beginning because she was very American, and my mother would have preferred if she had been more Mexican inclined. But she really took to the Americans' way of being and the language, and my mother was not respectful of it. And so if you were an American, you were a lot, in her mind, you were a lot more impolite, discourteous, and weren't living a proper life. When you were Mexican, you were really good with family relationships. And Norma was, but she didn't. She did it in English, and my mother didn't like that at all. So it was not until way later in her life and our lives that she recognized that all of those divorcees that she had for children were not nearly as successful in their marriages as Norma and I were. And they were just, that was, so she had a hard time with my family. And she still, she stuck it out, and she did the best job she could when they let her, and which was not often. My father did like her a lot. He was very, very loving to her, which I found very useful because it made life easier for me not to have my wife being criticized by people inside my house. And so they didn't do much criticism when I was around, but she was. There would be gossip.
Yeah. And what about Norma's parents and you?
They loved me. Both of them thought I was sensational, and her entire family, her sisters and brothers, and cousins, and everybody. I was a real good addition to their lives, and they were a good addition to mine. And I really liked them, and they liked me. I loved my mother-in-law. I respected and liked my father-in-law a great deal.
And she was Mexican American. Her father was American, and her.
Well,
or was he born in Mexico?
He was born in Mexico, but he had gone to an American college in the United States. No? So his English was really good, and his understanding of Americans was good and admiring. He didn't dislike Americans, whereas my mother was a little less tolerant of the ill training that American kids got. I mean, they were disobedient, and they were not nice people. And my father-in-law was just fine with them, and he went to college in Missouri, and his English was great, and so but he was living in Mexico all the time. Even when they moved to California, he still kept the house in Mexico, and he worked there. He was a gold miner, and so he was mining for gold, and there wasn't much gold left in California, so he had gold mines in Mexico, which I thought was very a very strange thing to be doing because
Mhm.
I always had the sense that he was looking and not finding gold all the time, but he was doing okay, and he was finding gold occasionally enough.
It's an interesting business.
Yeah.
Doesn't I don't know if that even exists anymore at all. Gold mining.
Yes, it does.
Is it still? Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it has to somewhere in some
Yeah,
places.
in Mexico, yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of gold mines in Mexico, and also
Wow.
other kinds of mines.
Yeah, obsidian is popular.
Well, the gold mine was an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other mines, like lead and iron and all of those things, they were corporate.
Mm-hmm.
So he was an individual. He had his own mines and he was always, looking for the next strike.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a whole bunch of them. So he did well with that. So that was also a hard part of her life, is that her father was not really around a lot of the time. Most of the time he was in Mexico, and not finding gold, and she was in California with the rest of the family.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, yeah. And he had done everything possible to move the family to the United States, because he figured they would get a better education and they would be happier. And he was right, they were. Because he had a terrible life, we thought, in Mexico, just going around digging for gold. And so he created a second family in Mexico. So that was a very interesting thing that happened with her, emotionally, because at some point we all found out that he had this second family.
Wow.
And all of the children of the second family were named the same as the children of the first family. So he had another Norma over in Mexico, which I never met, and
with obviously another wife as well.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Which we never met her.
Did Norma ever meet any of the kids?
I think she met the Norma one time.
That's crazy.
The second Norma.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't know much about I don't know much
Yeah.
about the second family, other than
Existed.
they existed and they had the same names as
That's
their
crazy.
brothers and sisters. So yeah, that is kind of nuts. And she was sad about that.
Yeah.
But she took it okay. It didn't spoil her relationship with him.
Wow.
It was still her daddy, and he was a lot of fun and very interesting. One of her favorite memories was from him was when she was I don't know how old, maybe 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere fairly young. They would go to Mexico. The whole family would go to Mexico every summer. So and he would take them. They would drive to Mexico, and he would take them. So one time they were driving to Mexico, and the car was stuck. Was stopped because they needed to go to the bathroom on the side of the road. And all of a sudden she was doing that, and her father shows up in front of her, pointing a rifle at her, and he says, "Don't move." And he shot a snake that was about to bite her, a rattlesnake. And so, I mean, that was a big memory of how frightened she was and how grateful she was that he saved her life.
Or yeah.
By scaring the hell out of her.
Yeah.
And so she used to tell that story. And
that's like a cliche story. Like, that's like something you see in movies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there he is pointing his gun at her.
So funny.
And she thinks, whoops, what did I do? So she kind of pled for her life. And he said, be quiet and don't move. So she was quiet and didn't move until
Wow.
the shooting was over.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a very exciting thing. I mean, moving around like every summer going into Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
that was an adventure.
Yeah.
Well, every time it was an adventure. For those, I did that also, and I had adventures like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but not in fear of my life.
Yeah.
One of my great adventures in that was I used to take the bus. I didn't get driven like she did.
So you take the bus from Tijuana or from
Tijuana? Yeah, I took the bus from TJ and there was
to Hermosillo? Or-
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
usually it was here,
Yeah.
sometimes to Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pretty good at taking buses.
How long was the bus ride?
Oh, like 48 hours.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it was long enough. So one time it was raining and the cars were stuck, they couldn't move. And in front of our bus there was a circus with elephants. So they used the elephants to drag the bus out of the mud.
Wow.
So I was, we all got out, and there were the elephants pulling on the bus, and it was kind of exciting. I said, "Wow, this is something to talk about." So I talked about it, and I remember it very very well, and it was a lot of fun. And the drivers were always two, a driver and a co-driver,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time they sang. They were singing all the way. All the Mexican songs the ones I sing,
Mm-hmm.
they were doing, they would do, one of them would do the melody, the other one would do the harmony, which is what we did in my family.
Mm-hmm.
We sang, and some people could do harmony, and they did. And that's not here.
Yeah.
And so it was very very beautiful music, when it was sung in two parts. So that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from that, and I admired the bus drivers for being able to do that. And so I learned it.
How old were you when the elephants? Do you remember how old were you when the
I was
elephants
probably
did
about
that?
15 or 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
When were you traveling alone, or were you traveling with your family?
I was traveling alone. I always traveled alone on the bus.
Wow.
We sometimes my father took the car and we drove home, which is where we would go to my home in Hermosillo, which is going to be my home again as soon as I sign up for law school. And I'm very excited about that too,
Mm-hmm.
because I learned a lot by being in Hermosillo, as well as getting there. Because sometimes I found elephants
Yeah.
on the road, and that was a neat trip. They were always neat trips because
Mm-hmm.
there was singing going on. The food along the way was sensational because you'd have women come to the bus when it stopped and serve the nicest meals you can imagine. The great cooking on the road. Tacos of different kinds and different other concoctions that everybody enjoyed. That was one of the big deals. Same thing with the trains. The trains would stop and they would be surrounded by people selling wonderful food.
Yeah.
So that was, it was not a chore, it was not sad. It was a really happy kind of travel that we did, train or bus. Train was occasional, but bus was usual. And my older brother was with me some of the time, and he also had a lot of fun. And he didn't make it to the time we had the elephants pulling the bus out of the mud, but he was there. So I enjoyed that part of my life immensely. And that's one of the reasons I'm thinking I'm going to be enjoying the next part of my life, because I'm going to be driving back probably. No, actually.
I was going to ask if you were going to fly or
Well,
drive.
I was planning on buying a car and driving, but from here to Hermosillo is it was a 15-hour drive, and I said, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I had thought about it, and then I discovered that it would take 15 hours, driving, especially alone.
Yeah, I don't think you want to do that.
No, I didn't want to do that at all. It's safe. It didn't feel dangerous or anything.
Where will you fly into then? Will you fly into Mexico City?
No, I would fly from TJ from Tijuana to Hermosillo direct.
Nice.
There's always been a direct flight
Wow.
there, so
That's cool.
that's what I'm going to do more than likely, unless my now younger brother, he might want to go off
On a road trip?
on a road trip, in which case we would drive, and then we would probably take a night off at a hotel in Tucson or something, and have a great drive. But driving alone, I thought was not going to be.
Yeah, it's probably not the smartest.
But driving with someone else, like a brother, would be very, very a lot of fun. So he doesn't know that he's going to get the invitation to drive with me.
And where does he live?
He lives here in West Hollywood.
Nice.
Wherever we are.
Close to here.
Yeah, close to here.
Nice. Do a lot of your family know about your plans to go to Mexico?
No.
No.
Very few of them do. Not because I haven't told them, but because they don't live here, so I don't see them often. But my sisters and brothers are aware of it, and they're all very excited about it. They think it's a great thing that I'm going to be doing. And I am very excited because being in a place like this it's okay. The food's pretty good, not great, not as good as the bus food and train food in Mexico, but it's all right. And the people here are quite nice. But this is a pretty much boring place, partially because the older people here, which is all of us mostly, they live a very boring life.
Yeah.
Boring as hell, and it just doesn't feel like a place I want to be spending a lot of my time in. The one thing they have here that I haven't had almost anywhere else is a great library. So
And it's right across you.
right across there, yeah.
It's pretty good.
So I'm there a lot, and I get a lot of books and I read, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
And one of my dreams when I was a kid was to study law in Mexico, in my hometown. That was, but then I got into the USC and other American colleges, and by the time I had a master's degree, it was too late to become a Mexican lawyer.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go and see if I can do that, because it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Your life was never boring before. You never found yourself bored.
No, never. Yeah.
Even for a little bit, you never found yourself bored, and then you would pick up something new, or it was constant.
It was constant.
Wow.
I always had something else I could do. I always did what I wanted to do. Most of the time I did what I wanted to do. I did. Like when I decided I wanted to go to USC, I got there because I thought that's the place to be. And instead of going, I had gotten admitted to the law school in Hermosillo, but I decided to go to USC instead, which was the great thing because that's where I met Norma, and so I'm not at all sorry I made that choice. No, it was a great choice, and I enjoyed the education there immensely. I really liked. We had a lot of the criminal guys that worked with the Nixon administration were graduates of my same
Wow.
same year. They were not my friend. They were the fraternity guys
Mm-hmm.
who were all crooks basically, and not nice people. But I had a group of really nice people who were my friends, and we were intellectuals, and we were there because we wanted to save the world, whereas the Nixon people wanted to be powerful.
Yep.
So we kind of saved the world, and I went off to and got did my graduate work, and had a great time with it. And part of it was in international law, and I did not like international law at all. But I'm going to go to law school anyway.
Yeah. In what ways were you like thinking about? In like, did you say you wanted to save the world? Like, did you guys have like a philosophy behind that, or were you just? Is that now what you call it, or did you guys refer to yourselves as people who had an interest in saving the world?
No,
then?
that was like a natural thing, that we had people who wanted to do the right things for the world.
Mm-hmm.
We had no interest in the fraternity life, and we had very little interest in being part of the Nixon gang, and they didn't invite us anyway because we were goody goodies, you know. And so we did things that you do when you want to save the world. Like I joined the Model UN contingent at USC and had an extraordinary good time, because that's how you save the world, by knowing the world, and we wanted to know it, and that went beyond the U.S. And in my case, it went beyond the U.S. and beyond Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to be president of Mexico. That was
Really?
the other ambition that I had
When you were in college?
when I was in college. So yeah, until I found later that it was not I had to become a crook to do that.
That's a pretty crazy goal though, to even have in your mind.
Yeah, no, I had it in my mind, and so did my brother. My brother and I were interested in that, and he got closer than I did.
Mm-hmm.
He actually was in the Congress and was hired by the government to represent Mexico at the International Monetary Fund, and he did a great job of it. But once he became a delegate or a member of the Congress, he kind of lost his way, because everybody in the Congress was a crook. I mean, that was the impression, and I think it was the way it really was. But I never was part of it, so I didn't get a chance to play in that game, and I didn't want to, because being a crook was disappointing, because I did want to be in the government, but I didn't want to be doing what I had to do, which in Mexico I came to the conclusion that in order to be successful, I had to be crooked up until I was successful. Then I could become an honest person again, and that's no fun at all. So I stayed in the private sector and did advertising and marketing all my career until now.
But yeah, I mean, it wasn't only staying in the advertising sector that made you not crooked.
Right.
You wanted to be not.
Oh, I loved it.
You didn't want to be seen as someone who was. Was it that you didn't want to be seen as someone who was crooked, or you felt morally that was wrong?
I felt morally that I wouldn't be able to stand the life that people like my brother were living by being involved with the crooked people, and you had to be one of them to succeed, or else you didn't succeed. And that was a reality, and we all knew the reality. For a while, I thought I could fix it, if I really worked hard at it. But decided no. When I was in graduate school, I was offered a job in the government,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also told that I could have a second job if the first one didn't pay enough. Because that's one of the things that happens in Mexican government, or at least then, that they wouldn't pay you.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be a crook, or else you couldn't you couldn't support your family.
Yeah.
And I said, fuck that. I'm not going to have two jobs.
Yeah.
Because you could get out at 3 o'clock because you started at 7 working for the government, and then you started your second job at 3.
Yeah.
And then you worked as late as you needed
As
to.
you could, yeah.
And so that was not a life that I wanted to lead. Besides, I liked my family. I liked my wife.
Yeah.
A lot. So I decided I'll stay private sector. And I was doing okay, having a lot of fun in the private sector and being mostly successful. Or half successful. Because I was never able until much later to get a really influential job in advertising. I became the general manager of an advertising agency, which I thought was what I wanted to do, and I did. I enjoyed that tremendously.
And what company were you
That was a place called Doyle Dane Bernbach.
Hmm.
And they were famous for having a Volkswagen account.
Hmm.
And they did all the great Volkswagen advertising.
Mm-hmm.
We did some of that in Mexico, and it was sensational.
Yeah.
But it was a sick company, really sick, because of Volkswagen, because the Volkswagen client were all crooked. Germans we thought, and I don't want to say that publicly because it's not true, no? But in our business, the clients were crooked. We had to give them gifts of silver during Christmas. That was a requirement for the agency, and you'd give them silver plate or stuff like that. In my case, when I was a manager, I gave them small gifts of silver. Nothing that it didn't feel like a bribe to me because they were small. But usually you were supposed to give them big stuff, and I didn't. And the head of the Volkswagen company in Mexico was a former U-boat captain. We used to shoot American submarines and other things like that. So they were pretty awful people, I thought.
You ended up being kind of right, because then what was that 2016 when they faked all their diesel emissions? Volkswagen did. Volkswagen said that their diesel emissions were way better for the environment than they actually were.
Yeah.
And they got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I didn't participate in that.
No, I know you didn't participate in that.
But
you ended up being correct in maybe in your perception of Volkswagen.
No, I didn't. I didn't notice it that much. I was not all that sensitive to other people being crooked and doing the wrong thing. But and at that time I was not so concerned about the environment as I should have been, as we all are now. But I was sensitive to the fact that I had to deal with some very nasty people all the time. The clients were they wanted it wasn't great advertising, but they were very bad about demanding it. And well, they didn't demand it. We did it because we wanted to. Everybody that worked in the agency wanted to do great work. There was no doubt about that, and we did, because the client didn't do the advertising, but they either liked it or didn't like it, and we did stuff that they loved, so we were able to keep the business and not get fired. As if we hadn't, they would have gotten rid of us very quickly. So I was part of doing great advertising, and that very satisfying. And we did one of the commercials where the Volkswagen goes into a river and floats across the river to get to wherever the story took us. And that was great fun, the kinds of things that we did. And we once did a commercial for one of their new brands, and we did it in, we hired a big boat in New England and shot the commercial from the boat.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful piece of advertising. And we sold a lot of cars, and they had a lot of fun. And that was one of my favorite things, because when I got to I think, where was it, Maine, it was so beautiful. It was in the fall, so the leaves were turning red and all of that. That I thought to myself, I can't do this. I cannot see this without Norma. So I call her, they come over here and hang out while we do the advertising, and you can be looking at this beautiful stuff. That was one of the big things that cemented our relationship, because I was having a wonderful time, but I was unhappy
when you weren't with her.
That she was missing it. It's not that I missed her. She was missing what she should have been seeing.
You wanted to share experiences.
Yes, exactly. That experience, I thought. And so she made it over, and she had a great time, and it indeed strengthened an already strong relationship.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for her. She talked about that, and to her friends and others about, and in a sense, being admiring of me for being so nice, because I didn't need to invite her. No, there was no, because I was having a great time. So.
And you were doing that on multiple occasions, or was it just
Yes.
that once? You were doing that all the time.
Yeah, I thought about her all the time.
Yeah.
And some of those it was possible to include her in the experience. That was one of the biggest ones. It was so fucking beautiful, and we were having such a good time doing that. And she liked good advertising, and she loved that I had actually decided to share insisted on sharing the experience with her. So that was an important part of our relationship, because that's how we thought about each other.
That you wanted to do things together.
Do things together, enjoy things together, which is not all that normal or that usual. So we had a great time with that. So that was part of my success with her, or not our success with us together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we had a good time, ate lots of lobster, and did the things that people do when they're in Maine.
Yeah.
And so I remember that very fondly.
What I'm wondering is like, when you were growing up, were you romantic like that, in the sense where you were always thinking about sharing these experiences with someone else, or did it really all come into your mind when you met Norma?
I think that's when it came into
Yeah.
mind. I didn't have a lot of girlfriends.
Yes.
So.
But even if you didn't have girlfriends, you still maybe have been thinking about it. But maybe not. Maybe you didn't think about it until Norma.
I didn't have anybody to share it with. I would share it with my older brother.
Yeah.
He and I shared a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
And I enjoyed it, but that was a good thing to do, but not quite the same as with your woman. So I was very.
But you didn't what I'm trying to say is you didn't know that it's not the same as sharing it with a woman until you met Norma,
That's right.
and then you realized
Yep.
that.
Having a perfect partner was something that was possible.
And was something that you needed, or that maybe not that you needed.
No, I didn't know I needed it.
You didn't know, but now do you think you needed it?
I continue to remember it very fondly and wishing I could have it again.
Yeah.
So I may be starting to look for a partner one of these days. You never know. So which means I have to get out of here because they're all old. I'm much too old. I'm one of the younger kids in the place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is a very insightful question because I'm thinking I wish I had a partner, and there could be other partners like that because there are people like that. So I may have that story to tell you at some point, but for that I have to get out of here and go back to it. That's one of the reasons I want to go back to Hermosillo, because it's full of that sort of
people that you feel that you can have these shared memories with, and that you want to have shared memories with.
Yes, exactly. And I don't, I don't have many candidates for that, but they exist, and you never know, you never know what, because Norma was a big surprise to me when I met her, and she continued to be a surprise to me the entire time we were together. But could happen again. You never know.
But would you want it to happen again?
Yes, I would, of course, because that was such a worthy part of my life, to be dealing with a woman that had everything I needed for my mate to have, and she did. And there may be another one around, in which case I will tell you about her at some point. But I'm not staying away from women just because of anything, except that there aren't any around here that I'd like to hang out with. So that is something that I have to resolve in my own